Hi and welcome to our part 3 of our Organising mini lecture series. In this mini lecture we really want to start to talk about organisational design and what it is, and then outline the 5 contingency factors that we need to consider when we're designing organisations. So in our last mini lecture I started to discuss the idea of an organisational design. In this mini lecture we're going to talk about what that means and what we need to consider in the process. So an organisational design is a process of creating a structure that best fits the company's mission and objective. All right. So in this process, we're starting to think about what are the environmental concerns, the strategies that exist, the people, the technology, and the size of the organization, and how do I put them all together to get the best fitting design and structure. All right. So in the last mini lecture, we spoke about the advantages and disadvantages. The organizational design consultant, or the person in charge of doing this design process, will consider all of those advantages and disadvantages, but they'll also take into consideration the environment, strategies, people, technology, and size, which is important. So organizational designs can be bureaucratic. Now, the bureaucratic design thought, you would remember from our history lecture, and what it says is that organizations are formed based on logic, order, and legitimate use of authority. And there's 2 approaches. You can have a mechanistic approach or an organic approach. So a mechanistic approach basically says that in an environment that is stable and not likely to change, then everything has to be ruled and logical. However, in an organic approach, in an unstable environment such as that in IT or consultancy or even gaming companies, we can't have rules and forms in the same form for everything because things change so rapidly. So different designs fit for different reasons. So let's take this through a bit more. So if we're looking at our bureaucratic designs, we actually end up having a centralized system where there are many rules and procedures in place. Not many people can make decisions, so we've got a narrow span of control, and all the tasks allocated are specialized. Okay, so someone is trained up for doing that particular job, and you cannot do anything other than what you've been trained for. You're also able to be free of teams, so there's very few teams that exist, and the coordination between departments or even doing something is very formal and impersonal. There's a process for that. However, on the flip side, where we've got adaptive organic designs, we're actually starting to unpack in an environment which constantly changes. So, of course, I need to be decentralized and I have few rules and procedures because I can't operate a gaming company in an environment that constantly changes on a day-to-day basis if I have the same rule or procedure for the same thing. It doesn't work that way. So I need few. I need a wide span of control because I need to empower my workers to do what they need to do at that point in time to get the product out there. And I need to have shared tasks. The good thing about adaptive designs or organic designs is that in an interprofessional workplace, you're actually upskilling on multiple skill sets because you have to have shared responsibilities and tasks. There's also many teams and task forces that exist, and you'll tend to find that the coordination between departments or even trying to organize an event is really quite informal and personal. So mechanistic designs are those ones that have tight structures. All right, so they're very centralized, they have lots of rules and procedures, and right now you're probably thinking of our government departments such as Centrelink. So in Centrelink, for example, we have clear-cut divisions of labour. Each of those Centrelink employees have a very narrow span of control. They know exactly how much they can approve, what they can approve, and who needs to be escalated to. And they have formal coordination. So if you need to be sent from one to the next, there's an actual process for that. So these are all part of mechanistic designs, and they're really important in organisations such as military and public service organisations such as Centrelink. On the flip side, adaptive designs are those that have minimum bureaucratic features, as we mentioned before, and they encourage worker empowerment and teamwork. The good thing about organic designs is that it changes depending on what's happening with the environment and where the organisation needs to go. So they have fewer rules and responsibilities, or fewer rules and procedures, sorry, not responsibilities. They have open divisions of labour, wide spans of control, so a lot more people have the ability to charge things or do things that they'd normally not have if they were in a government company. And they have more personal coordination, so they may actually send out an email rather than the system. The idea is that in an adaptive design, you have to trust that people will do the right thing. Okay, so if we're talking about a learning organisation that continuously changes and improves using lessons of experience, then we have to go with adaptive design. Whereas if we're trying to get an organisation in place that can stand the test of time, have formal rules and procedures, and is really tightly controlled, then we have to go with a bureaucratic design. The other type of design that's come out is this idea of a virtual design. So a lot of companies now exist, but they don't actually physically exist. Think about black milk clothing, for example. They exist online, and they may have a workshop somewhere, but they don't actually exist in a shopfront situation. So virtual designs are new. They're distinctive forms which are designed to create value. The idea is that they have minimum front-end costs in the sense of trying to set up an actual building. They're hybrid, and they use technology to communicate. So they sell only online, or they do whatever they do online in an online environment only. So they lack that physical structure. Now, these are getting more popular as we go through in society, and you'll find that as we go through the course, we talk about our international dimensions of management. This is what actually happens first before an organisation commits to coming overseas. But of course, when we're designing an organisation, we really need to consider the environment, strategy, size and life cycle, and the human resources that are needed. Because these are the contingencies. So I mentioned that we're going to talk about the contingencies. These are them. So let's work them through. An environmental contingency is really about how much certainty do I have that my environment around me isn't going to change. Okay, so when I'm designing an organisation, I need to start thinking about how much can I have flexibility in the way I do something to meet the outcomes. So if, for example, I have low environmental uncertainty, then I can have vertical structures and bureaucratic designs through strategic focus, efficiency and predictability. Okay, but if I have high environmental uncertainty, I really don't know what's happening, then I'm going to have more of an adaptive design. Okay, so my strategic focus is on innovation and flexibility in order to make and work through those market demands. In terms of strategy, there are different types of strategies you can choose. You can choose a stability-orientated strategy for those companies that don't have an unknown external environment, such as government. So they assume that little change is coming, and therefore everything is planned and programmed as a routine. Whereas the growth-orientated strategies actually says that in order to succeed, I need to innovate, I need to be flexible, I need to respond to those market conditions because they change on a day-to-day basis. So if we're thinking about Centrelink, for example, there is little changes in the government policies regarding Centrelink, and when they are, then there's a whole process for that. But generally speaking, Centrelink doesn't change. Whereas a consultancy firm who is high-end, so Ernst & Young, for example, they often need to change because one day they're talking to healthcare, the next day they're talking to the banking system, to the next stage they're talking about to gaming companies. So they need to be more adaptive to what's happening in the external environment. Technology also changes, and the ability to implement technology and have that assist with your organizational design depends on what type of technological demands, innovations that exist in that particular space. So by technology, we mean the knowledge, skills, equipment, and work methods that are used to transform our inputs into outputs. Okay, so back in week 1, we talked about this open system that we all operate in, where something comes in, so all of our resources come in, the magic happens in the transformation process to produce an output. This is talking again in that transformational process about what do we need in order to get our inputs into outputs. So our core manufacturing technology can be classified as small batch production. So each item or batch is made differently to fit customer specifications. So if you're thinking about the car manufacturing industry, you can choose when you go buy a car what color you want, what size you want, what different little technological features, whether you want the Apple Play or normal car system, whether you want security, whether you want red door handles or blue door handles. So there's more, in some cases, particularly in the elite car classes, they have small batch production because you have to fit the demand to the customer. Whereas in mass production, so if you're thinking about the paper industry where they've got lots of the same things over and over again, producing government documents, we actually get a large number of uniform items in an assembly line. So think about our Holdens. So let's go with a simpler example. Car factory, manufacturing, Holden Commodores. Right? There's lots of the same thing coming in and out every day. So the process can be different. And then there's a continuous process production where we've got this highly automated production system that just happens and we don't even think about it anymore. So technology needs to be considered when it comes to organisational design. The other thing that needs to be considered is this size in the life cycle. So how long do we want this design in place? This isn't a forever decision. This is a 2 to 3 to 5 years. And ultimately, what point in our life cycle are we at this organisational level? Are we a mature organisation? Are we an immature organisation? Have we been around for a long time? Do we know what's happening in the market? Do we not know what's happening? Are we big? Are we intending on growing, or are we intending on downsizing? What's our future plans? So all of these things come into play when we're starting to talk about contingencies. And our next one is our human resource factor. So as I mentioned at the start of this series, human resources are often known as the only thing that makes that competitive advantage happen within organisations and between organisations. So if people are a contingency, but they're also a resource, how do we make sure that the structures that we put in place are supportive in order to achieve what they need to achieve? All right, so there has to be a fit between the structure and the people. And that's really difficult, but it is something that organisational design consultants are expertise in order to get the right match and fit between that organisation. All right, so that's organisational design in a nutshell. As I mentioned, there's bureaucratic mechanistic organisational designs. So they tend to be vertical in nature and routine, whereas adaptive and organic designs are much more horizontal and best suited to conditions that have lots of change and flexibility within that. There are 5 contingency which you need to consider. So environment, strategy, technology, size, and people. And they all impact the way in which we put together a design of a company. And that's really important for you as a manager, because without understanding the right design, we can't manage effectively within that if we don't know the fit. I look forward to seeing you again soon.